If your company is remote or hybrid, then you know how hard it can be for employees to build meaningful connections with each other. Well, this week's sponsor is here to solve that, and they are called Mystery. Mystery has changed the way that I even think about employee engagement. They use the power of data and virtual events to drive employee connections. I actually recently attended a Mystery demo, and let me tell you, I learned so much about the potential behind employee engagement and how Mystery's events drive connection and belonging. So I'm excited to share that there is a special promotion for listeners of my podcast. Thanks to Mystery, you can get your first 2 Mystery events for the price of 1. That is right, 2 events for the price of 1. So if you're looking for a way to improve employee engagement and drive connection in your organization, I highly recommend checking them out. Go to trymystery.com/HR-podcast. That's trymystery.com/HR-podcast to get this special offer. Plus, I've added the link in the show notes so you can just click there. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, share with a friend, family member, stranger, however you want to get the word out that this is the podcast for them. And again, thanks for being here for another week. We're officially in 2023, at least by the time this episode will be out. With me this week, on this week's episode, I have Heather Marasse, and we're going to talk all about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as you could tell by the name of this podcast, which is bringing humanity back to the workplace. Heather is the managing partner of Trilogy Effect and is known for her grounding presence, community orientation, and focus on action. Heather was drawn to leadership and organizational development after experiencing its impact firsthand as a leader in marketing, product development, and change management in the telecom sector. Her experience also includes working in pharmaceuticals, consumer goods, finance, healthcare, mining, and natural resources, which to me sounds like every major industry. And I know Heather is nodding her head if you're watching. If not, just let this be the visual signal to you that Heather is totally in agreement there. And Heather works with a wide range of clients from global Fortune 500 companies to equity-backed small businesses. She enjoys working with nonprofit organizations as well and has spent more than 20 years collaborating with clients to develop high-functioning teams, unleash and realize innovation, always with measurable results. So with that, welcome, Heather, to the podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, I have to say, those industries are major industries. You've basically done everything with everyone.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this. I know that my bio says I think I have more than 25 years of experience, but the truth is I have 39 years of experience.
Wow, you're going to have to update that.
I think we're shy to tell the truth about that, but I had 14 years in telecommunications, and This is my 25th year in consulting. So that explains the breadth of the coverage there in terms of industries, and there are some that weren't even mentioned.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that everyone listening is going to really see you as a trusted and experienced voice on this podcast. I think experience is incredible, and you should definitely update that to nearly 40 years or 4 decades. And then once you hit 40, then, it's 4 decades or 40 years. Yeah. Definitely be proud of it. That's amazing.
Of course, I started when I was very young.
Well, hey, we all have to start at some point somewhere, right? Yeah. I mean, some people are just starting now too. So it just goes to show you the way that our experience can come at any time and also shape our future. 40 years ago, you were starting out, and here you are on this podcast.
I know. Isn't that fun?
Love it. I love it. It is fun. Well, let's jump into this because it goes without saying. The name of the podcast is Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources, and the name of your game is Bringing Humanity Back to the Workplace. So we are akin in this, and we are definitely aligned in, what our missions are. Now, in terms of the what you do and the execution of bringing humanity back to the workplace, can you share with the listeners how you do that? Why this mission is so important to you, and how it's led your involvement with your clients over the years?
Sure. Well, it's funny, but our tagline is "Being human is good for business." And it started as a bit of a question, like, what if being human is actually good for business, as opposed to, focusing on that aspect of the business isn't real work. And so what I started to learn in my own personal career as I advanced through, multiple roles and steps on the career ladder, that I was becoming better and better equipped to deal with the technical aspects of my work and less equipped to deal with the human aspects. And yet, somehow, when things required innovation, extraordinary performance, what seemed to break down all the barriers was when we all just got together and reconnected, rediscovered that we were working with a bunch of human beings who had, real lives beyond work. Mm-hmm. And we started to allow the level of relationship to impact the field upon which we were playing on the technical side. And so it just started to uncover for me the importance of allowing humanity in as we tackle, some really wicked problems in our businesses and in our organizations. And that was, maybe for me anyway, the real work of my work.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm reflecting on something that you mentioned when we were offline, which is the way in which things changed. And I know you led off by saying no one wants to talk about the pandemic anymore. It's 2023 by the time this episode comes out. But the reality is that there was a huge shift in, I think, the realization. You called it a reckoning. I totally agree with that adjective. And the reason why I bring it up is because actually I think it's a really important distinction that there is this sense, I think now more than ever, that businesses do understand, hopefully most businesses do understand, that focusing on your people is good for business, bringing humanity back to, using your tagline that, humanity is good for business and being good to people is good for business. That I totally agree with wholeheartedly. And I do think it took, unfortunately, a pandemic to help people realize that in one way or another. And whether people are acting on that today, is another topic that we can broach later into this podcast. But when we think about that, I'd love for you to share with the listeners what you shared with me when we were offline, in how this reckoning that the pandemic brought on into the world, I should say, how we can reflect on that today.
Oh, sure. I mean, when I think back to pre-pandemic days, there was still some unspoken rules of the game around compartmentalizing. Don't bring your personal stuff to work. For sure, don't bring your personal problems to work. Professionals are in a professional game. And there was an unspoken and unwritten rules around compartmentalization. And when our world changed so dramatically and people needed to step up to performance in a whole new kind of environment, and companies made it possible for people to work from home on a very grand scale, it required us to integrate more our whole lives. People were showing up on Zoom calls and Teams calls with cattails going across the screen, or the people bringing babies in for feeding time and cameras getting turned off. I remember being on a Zoom call where one of the members kept turning off her camera because she was feeding her baby, and it was an 8 p.m. at night call, where we were talking to a team in Hong Kong. So, and it just became more permissible to have a whole life.
Yeah.
And what that brought to the fore as well is people, under the kind of stress of the change that we were all going through, people started to be more honest about their mental health requirements, the mental health requirements of their family members. And it just brought more humanity into the work experience. And I hope that is something that we won't throw away now. Yeah. I hope it's changed things forever, because I think it was a good thing. It showed that we are whole people, and that makes a difference in how we connect and how work gets done, and the impact of our products and services too.
Absolutely. And I'm with you. I hope it doesn't change either. I've spent a lot of time talking about this concept on the podcast that, you know, our baggage is not checked at the door anymore, proverbial door if you're working remotely like me. And, you know, all of that luggage comes with you every single day. And it's not to say that everything that's going on in our personal lives is baggage, but the reality is that we have to understand that people, ourselves, our employees, our bosses, our colleagues are all coming to work, not leaving their personal sides to themselves at work anymore, or at home anymore. And they're coming to work as a whole human being. And we always have. But I think that, to your point, before the pandemic, there was a bit of a separation of church and state, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there was certainly this sense of unprofessionalism if you brought too much of yourself to work. At least that was the experience that I remember. And I don't think it was right or wrong. I just think it was the culture of society at that time. And now society has changed since the pandemic to afford us this ability to have more humanity at work. I mean, I always reference the social justice movements of 2020 and before and after, right? But we saw, I think, every business, every leader understanding the impact that a pandemic where you are left inside of your house, not knowing what the future held, combined with a real focus on needing to improve the social equation and experience for everyone in this country, but especially certain groups of people, and how that can't be left at the door. It's just not a possibility, nor something that people want. So, and I realize I'm generalizing here because I don't know what everyone in the world wants, but this understanding, I think, does take us to, okay, now we're in 2023. What does that mean for the future of work? And how can we continue to build on this level of humanity? And I think that there are groups of people who probably say, I don't want all of my stuff at work. I don't want to bring all of myself. I want still that separation. But that is humanity as well. And so I'd love to hear from you in you know, I should share, I'm thinking about how you talked about your approach with coaching and your consulting business, and how there is a bit of a blurred line between a therapeutic practice, which could be seen maybe as more radical. And I don't want to generalize or, just kind of sweep over what, or gloss over what you will expand on. But can you walk us through these approaches that help to build on this level of humanity?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that the thought that we were separating church and state is false, but there was no room to talk about it. And if you ask anyone who's been coaching for a while in the field that we're in, which is leadership development, you know that people bring everything to their work, and patterns and habits and issues that are affecting me in my life get played out on the business field as well as they do on the home front. And so coincidental with the pandemic, my colleagues and I, my business partners and I, had decided that we needed to be better equipped. We're not therapists and don't proclaim to be. We are coaches and we're business people. However, because the lines were often so blurred in our practice, when people would come to us with challenges and the things they wanted to work on. We wanted to be better equipped to deal. And so we started to study and practice with an approach to psychotherapy called IFS, or Internal Family Systems, which is an approach that has a lot of traction around the world. And it's based on the premise that we are all a multiplicity of personalities. You know, the hat I wear at work, the hat I wear at home, the hat I wear when I'm the team leader, the hat I wear when I'm just a resource to the team. We have a lot of different parts in us waiting to come out to play. However, until we start having some clarity around the different roles that I'm playing and how I may show up in a way that is less than optimal, we're not able to put them to the side and just be ourselves. And that's what we work on with our clients all the time, is to just get all of the noise that we all have going on in our heads, especially as things get stressful and the stakes get high, and just come to a grounded, calm center and be present to the moment, meet the moment, and trust that our best selves will show up. And that's the approach we started to integrate, because we just felt we wanted to be better equipped for the support for our clients and the challenges that were being faced.
That's really interesting. How was it received by your clients? This, like, I don't want to say untraditional approach. So if that's, I mean, I don't want it to be taken the wrong way if I say that, but actually I think it is somewhat untraditional, right? Because not a whole lot of businesses out there focus on the piece of humanity in business that makes us human, which is all of these things that run through our heads that are not, you know, that we can certainly just level out as like, oh, that's, you know, that's how this person is, that's how this person is. But when you take a psychotherapy approach or a therapeutic approach, there is like a deeper level to understanding humanity. So what was the initial reaction when your clients received that approach?
Well, the reality is that often you don't have to say it. You know, a coach's and a good consultant's most important tool is their listening. So it gave us more depth to listen from. And so, for example, I had a client who repeatedly every year, the feedback was, "You're great, you're wonderful software executive." And unfortunately, when we get to the big meetings, we don't hear enough from you. He would be quiet. And it was frustrating for him. It was frustrating for his boss, because he knew this is the guy who they wanted to hear from in these meetings, because he knew that he could really contribute. So, you know, I was not direct about it, but I just started to integrate some of the ways of listening and guiding him in his exploration as he would talk to me about this. And where we got to was he discovered that at a very young age, he found out that anger upset his relationships, and he lost a friend over it when he was very young. And so what shut him down from expressing himself was when he gets angry, because he doesn't want to lose connection with the people who matter. Well, when he's in a big meeting and things get controversial and he cares about the people he works with, at the moment when his boss wants to hear from him and his colleagues want to hear from him the most, he shuts down. So this was a big revelation to him. And as he started to practice and test the fact that maybe I can speak up and say something controversial and I won't lose relationship with my colleagues, things started to change for him. He actually got promoted. So that's just a real example. And he had no idea that I was integrating IFS into the approach until afterwards, because he got curious. And then he asked me, how did you, what were we doing there?
Do that?
And it was like, yeah. And he was fine with it because it worked.
Right. That's really interesting. I think if I'm recalling correctly, which I might not be, when we first connected before, of course, before recording, we talked about coaches holistically, and that there are so many coaches out there, hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of coaches. And I think I shared with you that I'm a little skeptical of coaching, because how do you validate that someone is able to support you? How do you verify that they have the experience and the knowledge and the wherewithal to support your career forward? Now, potentially since we spoke, I had an opportunity, thanks to a previous guest that I had on, to try career coaching for the first time. And I am a reformed skeptic because there were things that I didn't know about myself, or there were things that through the experience, though I don't believe that they used IFS, through that experience, I was able to kind of talk out application of strategy and things that otherwise you don't necessarily have a partner to do that with, unless you have a partner to do that with, right? And so I am here to say for all the listeners that, I think if anything, it's worth trying, because I thought that I would never find something or someone that could reform my thinking around coaching. And I actually believe the reason why I bring this up is because I believe that we had talked about this idea that there are so many coaches, and how do you validate? I mean, there isn't necessarily a certification, but there is a certification to be a coach, but there's no certification to validate their knowledge and experience. So what are your thoughts on that as I share my journey? And I'm not still in a coaching environment, but I would definitely be open to it based on this experience that I had. But what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think there are a lot of different kinds of coaching. There's career coaching, there's performance coaching. We don't do either of those. Mm-hmm. Our work, I always say our coaching is not remedial. We coach people in the area of releasing or unleashing their potential. So our first and foremost starting point is there's nothing wrong with you. And you may have things that you've been told that you need to work on, but you're a human being, so welcome to the club. However, if we start from the problem solution model, like you're a problem and that we need to fix, we're just going to keep coming up with problems. So our approach is all about returning people to wholeness. And if I'm a whole person, it is a good idea for me to look not only at my lightness, but my darkness, like what's in the shadow, because often that's where the real, the stuff that the wounding, I guess I'll call it for lack of a better word, is hiding. And it only shows up at the most inopportune times. So if we take a look with a compassionate and skilled guide at what's going on there, and what's, in my example, this horrible experience that this young man had when he got angry at a friend and the friend never spoke to him again forever. And that really, really hurt. And he kept bringing that to every important relationship in his life, especially male. When he was able to see that was absolutely, that's painful and it doesn't need to shape the rest of your life, then he's able to return to wholeness and be himself fully in any situation. So that's the kind of coaching we do.
Right.
And I think coaching, honestly, is a bit of a chemistry game. You can't be coached by someone who you don't feel safe with, who you don't have a connection with. I can't coach anyone. I might not have the background or the kind of temperament that appeals. So it really is a rather individual chemistry relationship, in addition to someone who's got the background and the training for the kind of coaching you're looking for.
Right. That's really helpful.
Long answer.
And no, yeah, I think it's really helpful because, for all of the listeners out there, it's a spread between experience and industry and everything, right? And sometimes there are I think there's a lot of thought leadership out there, And people are getting tired of that phrase, thought leadership. As we say it, it's already getting phased out, right? Yeah. And I am one to also say, let's change this phrase. Like, everyone's a thought leader in their own right? But I share this because you can really find yourself inundated with information. You go on LinkedIn, you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, wherever, you Google, you get newsletters, and it's all like, here's how to be a better you. Here's how to do this, find this, do that. I have a podcast telling people how to be better, how to, giving information and resources and challenging the status quo and reminding people that just because we believe it doesn't mean it's true, or just because it's true doesn't mean there isn't another level, right? So there's all this information, and sometimes it's really hard to discern where or what applies to our best interests. And I think your point on this chemistry game is a really good one. And this is where mentorship, support, I always talk about having a feedback partner, having multiple feedback partners. It is all chemistry. Part of the success in these episodes is how we extract really important discussions and information, right? And challenge the things that might be the status quo, which actually, as you were sharing the type of coaching that you all do, it was making me think about messages that I receive on LinkedIn, especially, and Instagram most often, around like, I'm using this phrase. I am not an expert in this, but I'm using it generally based on what is shared with me, but not from an expert perspective. But PTSD from toxic environments, traumatic experiences. And so when I hear you, sharing the type of coaching that you do to help break down these experiences to allow someone to find their whole selves again, it makes me think about these individuals who have reached out about how they are afraid of moving into another job because of traumatic experiences, because of PTSD, again, using their words, that they've experienced. So how, if someone's listening and they're like, oh yeah, I hear those phrases and I think of a workplace, I think of a boss that I had that really changed and shaped the way that I look at my own job or my future job and my future employer. What do they do if they're not in a position to get coaching? What are some steps that they can take? Maybe it leads to coaching through you, especially. What are some steps that they can take to right some of the wrongs, to find their whole being again?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'm just taking a moment to imagine myself in that situation. And I think the first thing I would do is, hopefully there's somebody at work I can talk to that I can trust and share with. Chances are, if you're in a toxic workplace, there's some people talking about it. Most workplaces do have an EAP or an employee assistance program where you can get access to some counseling or like a safe ear so that you can work through some of this. I would like to say it depends on the relationship with human resources, but sometimes that's a place where you can go to say, I need to find a resource. I need some support. I mean, it's way more accepted now than it was 3 years ago to say, I'd like to get some mental health support or some support for, I feel like I have some PTSD. I have some trauma that's affecting me. And then, yes, of course, if coaching is available, there are people who provide this. Your employer may not provide it, but there's usually somebody locally, if you Google support for PTSD, where you can go and get some help. This is going to be controversial, but I find that one of the best and free resources for people working through hard things, as Glennon Doyle would say, is any 12-step program, like an Al-Anon. These programs are free and they're anonymous, and they use tools that most coaches are skilled with. I mean, these are universal tools, and you're in an environment of support, compassion, And it's not people telling you what to do. It's simply listening and being supported. So that is a controversial. I haven't ever recommended that on a podcast before, but I know through, I've been around for a while. I know that is available to everybody, and it's free, and it makes a difference to a lot of people's lives. And you don't have to be a down and out, have somebody who's really, really struggling to avail yourself of those things. As a matter of fact, that's not usually who's there.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. That's really helpful. I will certainly add, those resources and some additional resources if I can find any in the show notes. So make sure all the listeners out there, make sure you check those out. As you were saying this, I thought of another thing, which is that I can hear in my head people that I worked with in the past who talk about these experiences that have shaped them, especially in the workplace, which is where I do think, this podcast is one way of reaching people to prevent those continued poor experiences for people, because we all contribute to a workplace, and we all should contribute positively. And especially for the listeners who are in HR, which most are, we do have a huge impact on how we can support people and how we can influence the shaping and future of an organization, no matter how big or small, public, private, doesn't matter. And, when I think about even colleagues of mine who have shared what their friends have experienced, it goes with you. You take whatever that person experiences in your workplace or a past workplace, travels with them to other workplaces. And that is, it's detrimental if it's not a good experience. And it's amazing if it was a great experience. And I think about specifically someone who I don't work with, but that is basically a mutual connection, who worked in a toxic work environment for years, didn't make any changes. And, we're not here to judge that person, but stuck it out, or, ignored it or allowed it or whatever, for, I think, over 5 years. And significantly, this shaped that person, and that person is now in a different environment and is almost incapable of moving beyond that. And it's affecting their ability to accomplish things that are within their scope, within their role. And thus it impacts the people around them, right? So, I think it is in all of our best interest to put people back out into the world better than we found them. So it's like, when we all encounter someone like that, it's not just about, oh, well, you got to get over it, you're not there anymore. It's understanding that all of those experiences, especially if you spend a number of years, you don't have to have a number of years in an environment for it to shape you, but especially when you spend a significant amount of time somewhere, you can't just leave it. It comes with you. It shapes the way you think, the way you make decisions. So, and I'm sure you've seen things like that too.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about the reckoning, where we are no longer able to compartmentalize. And frankly, compartmentalization is a bit of a joke, because it's just like this. We think that, that was that past job in your previous example. I'll just compartmentalize that and leave it behind. I finally got out of there. I'm going to now go to my next assignment. And lo and behold, the pattern is back. So, ultimately what I think it means to be a human being is to grow and develop into our full self as fully as we can before we leave. And the tool for that is self-awareness, is getting more and more familiar with what goes on in the machinery that I landed in here. What does that machinery look like, feel like, taste like, and how do I, when I get triggered, to use, I know, another often used, but when I get reactive, or when it's like I'm a tuning fork and somebody just pinged me, what, I'm on, what's going on here? It's probably got very little to do with what is in fact going on outside of myself. And now all of this automaticity that has been put there originally as a defensive strategy is now getting in the way of me being present and being my full self. Mm-hmm. And trusting that I can be someone beyond what that previous version was. Mm-hmm. And these people out here aren't the ones that I keep replaying in the set.
Right.
So it really is, that's what really, being human is only good for business if we work on that level of development.
Yes.
Because that then unleashes the potential instead of replaying the tape over and over again, no matter what situation we find ourselves in.
Right. Absolutely. There are two things that come to mind when I reflect on this. One is that, and I always make this comparison, but working and being employed, whether it's for yourself, with clients, or for an employer, is like dating. And all of those experiences, and this is not a romance podcast by any means, but I always say that, it is like dating. It's all about relationships, and we have good experiences and bad experiences, and hopefully you have more good than bad. But, when you're talking about, and when we reflect on this, that, there isn't just this like leaving the past behind. It's like being, when you have a bad relationship, you remember that. And you probably should, because it's a protective mechanism to ensure that you don't have that bad experience again. Like you do remember parts of it. And, when you finally find that good experience, sometimes there's a little bit of self-sabotage, maybe like in a bad relationship going to a good relationship. And in that self-awareness is so important. And I know that the majority of people are not self-aware. This is a statistic widely known that the majority, I think it's, I quoted it on a previous podcast, but I think it's like 15% of people are truly self-aware. Something like that, like truly self-aware. Really, there are people who think that they're self-aware and sometimes are and sometimes aren't. And then there are people who really, really are. So, but really everyone can be self-aware. It's a matter of that personal growth and all of those things. And the other thing that I thought about as you were sharing this is that I don't remember the exact analogy or formula, but I remember very early on in my career, someone shared with me that there are levels in our careers and our experiences as human beings. And that, it's almost like being in a fence or like a playpen, let's say. And, once you kind of master that level, you go on to the next level. You master that level and you go on to the next level. And it's when you master those things and you don't go to the next level that you are just complacent potentially and comfortable. And that and I know that there's a graph of like spheres also, that there's like this level of comfort and then you move on and there's this anxiety, and not the anxiety that is necessarily diagnostic, but anxiety in the fear of the unknown. What's next? Am I ready for this challenge? All of the things that kind of come with preparing for that next level. And so this idea and visualization of growth, which is jumping to that next pond, to that next level, is so important. And putting ourselves as human beings, whether it's in work or outside of work, in situations where we're not always comfortable, is part of growing. Growth is not something that feels good all the time, that is easy, or any of those things.
Right. Well, and most businesses are out for growth. And it's hard to imagine how you get there if you're not also encouraging the growth of the human beings who are producing the work. Mm-hmm. Right. When you spoke about the relationships and the dating idea, there's a book that I think you would love, and I recommend it. It's by David White, who's a poet, but he's also an author, and it's White with a Y, and it's called The Three Marriages. Mm-hmm. And it explores the possibility that we have three marriages in our lives. We have marriage with a significant other, maybe a couple of them throughout our life, but it's that primary, it's my person, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a very important relationship for our development. There's also the marriage we have with our work. We all have, want to contribute and make a difference with our lives, usually through some form of work, be it paid or otherwise. And that's an extremely important relationship for our development. And then the third relationship or the third marriage is with ourselves, because that's the one we come in with and that's the one we leave with.
Oh,
and that's a really important relationship, and it shapes the other two.
Mm-hmm. Oh, more than anything, I believe. Wow, that I'll have to read
so
this.
So it's quite a,
Yeah, I will add the link. I will add the link to the book, The Three Marriages you said. I will add that link in the show notes so we all can read it. This is our homework assignment because I love
Take your time with it. It's one of those books that you don't binge. You read, a few pages and you sit and you go, I might have to think about that for a while.
That's so funny. This resonates with me because I love reading. I'm an avid reader and I am reading all the time, and I have a Kindle, and these days I have any book that I own, like that is a hard or paper copy, is a book that I've already read or that I received or I bought, but I read it on the Kindle and I see the percentage left in the book and I'm like, oh, I got to keep reading. Sometimes I read too fast. I'm like, I did not retain that information. I have to go back, but I'm just so excited to finish it and start the next book that I have to enjoy the process a little bit more. But then once I finish that book, if I love it, I buy it. And my husband thinks this is a crazy, he thinks that I'm absolutely insane.
It's for, I might want to go back and reference something, right?
Yes. What I love about the Kindle. I realize this is totally off subject, but what I love about the Kindle is that you can highlight. And you don't have to mark up your book. Even though there's something, it scratches a part of my brain when I write in a book. I don't know what it is. What a great way to put it.
Yeah. It scratches a part of my brain too.
Right? And then I look at it, I'm like, oh, does this make me well-read? But then sometimes I can't even recall some of the information because I read it so fast. I'm so excited about the content. And then I'm like, I didn't do a great job of retaining that information. Now I have to go back and read it. But this is clearly a book that I will have to potentially not read on my Kindle so that I'm not looking at the percentage left, even though I can see how much is left.
Yeah.
But
it's a good one to listen to if you like audiobooks because he has a lovely accent and it's very, his voice is too. Yeah.
I've never experienced an audiobook ever.
Oh.
And I have a podcast.
You have a podcast.
I feel like, there should be some sort of innate desire to hear others speak. Maybe I'll have to make this the first audiobook, especially if there's an accent involved.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he read it now. I said that and I would have to trim this out, but I would have to see if it's narrated by the author. But I've heard him, recite his poetry and other things, and he does. He has a lovely speaking voice. So
I'll have to take this up. I can very easily connect with an audiobook, I'm sure. But nevertheless, coming back full circle to all of this, as we kind of close out our discussion here, this concept of bringing humanity back to the workplace, it's good for business, everything in between. Mm-hmm. What do you say to a listener who might be hearing the opposite from their leaders, from their managers, from their colleagues that, we don't have time for that? This is I think how we kind of started out the podcast, that there are naysayers out there who really believe that there isn't time or money or energy that can be devoted to this impact and importance of focusing on people and humanity. You know where I stand on this, but what do we say? How do we help equip listeners who are confronted with their own beliefs and having to try and influence others in their organization that it is good for business and that focusing on humanity and people can contribute overall to a better business?
Well, one way is to just practice it yourself and have your results speak for themselves. And, there's one thing to talk about it. There's another thing to just practice being human and humane and developing good work relationships with those who you need to work with in order to get good work done. Mm-hmm. So that's one way. This isn't about becoming a prophet, especially if there's no receptivity to it. Another thing, I really don't want to sound flippant about this, but if I'm working at a place that doesn't resonate with my values, I don't have to stay. I only have to stay as long as until I find the next one that does.
That's so true.
And it may take a while, but I can remember myself making decisions to leave places. It took months, in some cases a year, before I left. But knowing that I didn't have to stay and that I was now parallel processing my career path, it gave me peace of mind. I was able to be in the discomfort of the unpleasantness while also being more clear about the fact that I wasn't a hostage and I have agency. I can make other decisions with my life. So I really hope that doesn't come across as trite. I hope it comes across instead as empowering and encouraging. We are still a free society as far as I can tell. So we are very fortunate.
Right.
We are very fortunate. And I'm not saying do things impulsively, but usually when you tell the truth to yourself about what you need to do to change finds you. It's really amazing.
I love that. And it's so true. And, you know, I think that this is the beauty of having these discussions, that we can say things and we need to say things that are that important and direct, that no one is requiring you to stay anywhere. If you work in the US, probably, I mean, you're working at an at-will organization. You can leave, come and go whenever you want, basically. If it is not the right fit, then you don't have to stay. And I think there's no truer word said. And I think it's one of the important things that you said there is that being honest with ourselves is it's just a huge part of the entire understanding and perspective that we afford ourselves as we journey throughout our careers. And on top of that, I think coming back to this conversation that we had about the pandemic and what it's done for us is that we realize that life is finite. Our time here is finite. And every minute, every second, every hour spent should be contributing positively overall. Of course, there are going to be moments where we hate our jobs, or we hate our and that's okay and normal to have frustrating moments. But overall, there should be something positive to and from in that experience, in and outside of work, in your relationships, across the board. Coming back to this dating conversation, but or marriage conversation, whatever we want to say. It's really, your time is finite. We are really blessed to have the freedom to do and hopefully come in and go as we please in most places, hopefully around the world.
Yeah. It's like you said, I love what you said about life is, it is finite. There's one place we're all heading and it's inescapable, and you don't want to feel like you had no say in how it went.
Totally.
You do.
Take ownership.
Most of us do.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, this was a really amazing conversation. I have another new book I get to read now. And on top of that, slowly, no binging here, no binge reading. I'll have to refrain, not listen to my, not listen to my instincts. I have to take my time reading it. But I really appreciate you joining the podcast. You're doing something very different from what I've seen or experienced or had the pleasure to learn about with IFS and everything that you're doing on your end with your business partners. And so I'd love for you to share with the listeners where they can learn more about you and what you do and connect.
Yeah, well, you can find us on LinkedIn. Of course, you can find me. You can find our company, trilogyeffect.com. And we too have a podcast. It's called Being Human is Good for Business. And wherever you listen to podcasts, it's there. And that's how you found us.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. And I'm sure we will continue to see amazing thought leadership. I know, again, that phrase, but amazing things coming out of your thought leadership, as well as, the thought leadership coming out of what you all do at Trilogy Effect. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you, and good luck. You're doing a great work with your podcast. I've listened to a lot of the episodes now, and I love the eclectic nature of the collection here. It's wonderful.
Thank you I really appreciate that. Eclectic nature. That I need a shirt for that. That's exactly, that is my entire personality.
I love it. That's where how people grow.
Totally. Thank you so much. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.